I'm I'm Dr. Stephen Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. PAR is a nonprofit, nonpartisan state policy research organization and watchdog. As we get started, I really want to thank our sponsor, the Louisiana Independent Pharmacy Association, who represents your local community pharmacies, for making this webinar possible. As part of our webinar series today, we are discussing what happened in the just completed 2025 legislative session. A whole lot happened there. Everyone is still trying to figure out what's going on, what happened, what they thought happened but didn't. And so that we have a fantastic panel. We have House Criminal Justice Vice Chair Vanessa LaFleur from Baton Rouge. We also have on the phone House Appropriations Chair Jack McFarland from Winfield. And we also should have Senate President Cameron Henry joining us as soon as we work out one or two technical details. But I want to go ahead and get started. Oh, wait, here we go.
Hey,
That
what's
was just
going on?
perfect timing. We were just starting, Senator Henry. So we're just initiating. So thank you all for participating. Let me take a few seconds to make sure that the people that are participating understand. I'm going to ask a broad question about how the session went, something you thought went well, something you're maybe disappointed, and then we'll turn it over to Melinda, who will ask a few more detailed questions. But the heart of it is going to be the questions that people that are participating in. So we already have 200 people on there. One thing, put it in the Q&A and get it in early, because I just suspect there's going to be a lot of questions. We always try to get through all of them. Melinda will sometimes put multiple questions together, but the sooner you put them in, the better. So with that, let me ask y'all, and I'll probably start with Representative LaFleur, and then go to Chair McFarland and then Senate President Henry, just so we have some time to work through. From your perspective, what was the biggest thing that passed the session, and what was something you were disappointed to see pass? So, Representative LaFleur, why don't you start?
Sure. Hello, everyone. And I will be a little selfish, and I will say one of the bills that I presented, which was 268, and that's the bill where we changed the terminology for juvenile offenses to child sexual abuse materials. That's important to me because that was bought on behalf of victims. And it also gets us in line with the nation and the words and the terminology that's used. I'm also happy about the funding that we were able to continue with for early childhood education. That's important for the state, for our businesses, for our babies as well. I'm still sort of, when you talk about the biggest disappointment, I'm not disappointed today because of how the Senate handled it, but one of the disappointing seasons for me during this session was when we had to take to the floor on the DEI bill, because that was so personal and so hurtful personally. But again, I guess I can't call it a disappointment because the Senate handled their business.
No, it's all good. That's all good feedback. Chairman McFarland, what was your biggest achievement, and what were you disappointed in? And I know you're going to say House Bill 1, but maybe some details.
Absolutely. House Bill 1. When you spend as much time in the budget, and my Senate president, who was my chairman of Appropriations when I started 10 years ago, he can appreciate this. When you spend that much time, but look, what I'm excited about was that budget had the lowest growth rate since I've been in the legislature. And yet we still were able to fund all those services that the public expects for us to fund through government, especially the vital services. And when I say that, I'm talking about the healthcare, so many things through DCFS, such as the domestic violence, the advocacy centers, all of our ag stuff. Look, it was a really good budget for me. And the transparency which the Senate and the House have been able to work together has gotten us to this point where the 48-hour rule really did not impact us this time, because the transparency between the two collective bodies with the members, it was a much better it was a much better transition than what everyone anticipated.
Right. And just to remind everyone, the 48-hour rule, that was a constitutional amendment that passed that means that senators and representatives have to have 48 hours on a budget bill before they vote on final passage. So that was, everyone was kind of concerned that could push us into a special session.
Now, my disappointment is also the 48-hour rule, partially because the first 24 hours I got questions. The next 24, I didn't get the first question from any member or anyone else about the budget. So we really extended session a day longer than what was necessary. But I do get the common sense approach behind giving us time. No one likes surprises. I think the transparency with not just the legislators, but also with the public, Stephen, is gaining that confidence and that integrity back to us through that process. So that's my greatest moments and my disappointment.
It definitely seemed like it was going smooth, particularly on the budget issues toward the final run there. Senate President Henry, your sort of what you thought were the best things that happened and maybe one disappointment.
Well, I mean, I'm a budget guy at heart, so I appreciate the chairman's point. House Bill 1, House Bill 2, all the funding mechanisms for the state, the way we were able to dip into the revenue stabilization fund for 1.2 billion and address needs from the state without growing government with recurring expenses, I think is a plus. I think a bill that's probably not getting as much press as it needs is a bill by Kim Carver, Representative Kim Carver, dealing with age verifications when children get phones and download apps. I think the legislation they passed will probably become the model legislation for the rest of the country as it relates to making sure that kids aren't getting on apps they're not supposed to. Kim Carver and our local rep here, Slagle, did a fantastic job of working. They work with the interested parties, both sides, the industry folks, and then they kind of took a step back and then just kind of had to make a choice whether you're going to protect kids or companies. And they did a fantastic job at protecting kids. So I think that's a bill that most people really don't even know is out there, but I think is going to have a great impact on all of us. A bill that I wish we could have been a little bit more aggressive with is the bill to restructure DOTD. We had some big plans going in, and then once we really got in, it was 3 bills that went with it, I think, and 3 bills and a resolution. Once we got into that, we realized how big I mean, we know it's 5,000 employees, gazillion-dollar budget, but just the structure in there and the intertwining of federal dollars and state dollars and local dollars, and some of those federal dollars are paying salaries and retirement benefits. So I think that's something that's going to take a little bit more time for us to unwind. But I think we left in a good spot with it, and we'll be a little bit more aggressive next year. But we have to do it obviously in a very methodical way to where we don't shut down progress.
All right, thank y'all. That was a great starter. So now we're going to start some specific questions. I see only one question in the Q&A. Again, I would urge everyone to put it in there sooner rather than later. All right, so Melinda, what sort of detailed questions do we have for our fine panelists?
Well, Senator Henry, I'm going to follow up on the DOTD reorganization one. Obviously, that there were several bills that moved through the process to reorganize government. The DOTD ones were the highest profile, I think. But what do you expect to come out of that reorganization? It sounds like you expect more bills to come in the future. And how should taxpayers judge if it's a success to the reorganization effort?
I think what we're looking at is almost dividing DOTD. You can have a secretary, and then we have one department head that just deals with federal dollars, and the other part that deals with the state and local, to where we can streamline like the most basic processes that we have to go through. We did a little bit of that last year, and we did again this year, where we gave the DOTD districts, gave them each, and Jack can correct me on the number, $6 to $7 million each district to do minor repairs to roads, potholes, things like that, to get those things moving faster. I think we put, Jack, correct me if I'm maybe $4 million in for additional grass cutting. Things that people see every day. We're trying to improve that and the speed on which that is done. So I think just by reorganizing and restructuring, I think we're going to motivate employees to do things that they probably know they should do, but maybe haven't been given the autonomy to do them. And also we want to rework the expectations. And I've said this in some of the events you were at. If you give someone 7 months to do something, they're going to take 7 months. If you give them 7 weeks, they'll do it in 7 weeks. We want to move from 7 months to 7 weeks. And I think we're able to do it. The success will be probably 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road of complete streamlining. I think Tennessee has done this. It took them a while. But the fact that we have money on the street now, literally, as it was to fixing roads and cutting grass and the bridge projects that we did, I think by this time next year, you'll see even greater progress.
Okay. Representative LaFleur, was that a set of bills you were tracking, and what are you telling your constituents about what they should expect out of the DOTD reorganization?
I did track it, and luckily Ken Brass, who I think serves on that committee, sits next to me, so I got all of the advice regarding that from Representative Brass, and I try to explain to them sort of the work that we did with the restructuring for Workforce Commission and DCFS, right? That we can find ways in state government to make it leaner and do more. And that's what the ultimate goal, I think, is with DOTD is to sort of make it more responsive to the different areas in the state, which was a part of the plan also. But yes, I like the Senate President, am excited about the work that we can do as it relates to DOTD overall.
Okay. Representative McFarland, we have somebody asking about a gas tax, restructuring DOTD. That conversation always comes with discussions of whether or not to raise the gas tax. And I know that's a conversation you've been involved with before. Do you think that's coming in the future at all? Or is the restructuring aimed at trying not to have to raise the gas tax?
So I think it's a combination, actually. So last year, or during the session, we had one piece of that legislation that came to appropriations. And the questions kept coming up. Well, okay, well, how are we going to fund it if we enacted all these new laws? Well, the agency is already collecting almost $700 million, actually. I think it's about 640 to 660 million, but it's being consumed by administration, retirement. And if you shift that and started trying to use the dollars we've been using out of capital outlay and other resources that we've been forced to use, how much does that backfill that you're no longer having to shift from? There has been discussion about going to some type of a CPI index. What we should have done, I guess you can say 40 years ago, everyone's agreed that even if you passed a gas tax, that we need to have it CPI indexed. But I do believe that you could go back and index it now, and you wouldn't be necessarily raising the gas tax. You would just be putting in the CPI index to catch up with some of the inflationary costs that we have experienced in the last 40 years. So I like that idea. It was presented to me last year. I think they're still working on it. I think that if they could work out some nuances with it, that I think that is a good path going forward. So I'm optimistic that may happen in the next couple of years.
Okay. And just to explain it, it would take a tax session. So it'd be a couple of years in a regular session before y'all could consider that.
That's correct.
So we have a question about, we're just ending one session, but we already have questions about the possibility of a special session for PBMs. And I guess for those who may not have paid as close attention, in the final couple of days of the session, the governor tried a last minute sort of push to prohibit companies that own pharmacies from also owning the pharmacy benefit management businesses that negotiate drug prices. Those are PBMs. The bill stalled in the Senate after the House passed it, and the governor is talking about a special session on that issue. Senator Henry, do you know anything more about those plans? And can you talk through sort of why the Senate chose not to move that bill forward on the last day of session?
Well, the only thing I've heard about a special session was the last day of session since you mentioned it. I haven't seen him mention it again since then. the issue that we had in the Senate is the date itself the bill wasn't take effect until 2027. So some members thought, well, it's far enough where we could pass it, and then next year, if there's an issue during session, we can address it then. Other members had quite the opposite, said, well, let's not worry about it. We can study it, have the same effect, and then do something in 2026. What really came down to is something of this magnitude didn't go through the normal legislative process, where it wasn't a bill filed, there wasn't committee hearings on the Senate side or the House side, no public testimony, the most basic things you need to do when you're doing something of this magnitude that's going to affect literally everyone across the state. And at the end, that late day and being that late in session, having an implementation date that long out, members really feeling uncomfortable on, you know what, we haven't had public testimony. Let's study the effect of this will be. Same thing that I believe Ohio just did. I'm sure Arkansas would have preferred to study it instead of pass it and then get sued over it. Let's wait till next year, get a good study down, figure out what the effects would be, and then we can move forward with it. If we would have a special session, I don't believe it would be on this matter. Maybe redistricting possibly would be something we would have to address. Hopefully not, but maybe something based on the bill that's passed in Congress, what effect that has on hospitals and LDH, maybe have to come back to address something related to that. But I don't anticipate any of those, maybe dealing with redistricting at best.
Okay, so you haven't told senators to like upend their vacation plans for the summer then?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. I'm not sure who's best to answer this question, but we have somebody asking about carbon sequestration bills and which ones have been sent to the governor. Does anybody know which ones actually made it to the governor's desk? I feel like a lot of those didn't actually get through the process. Is that?
I thought we had something, and I'm going to ask my House colleagues to help me with this. I thought we had something in Senate Bill 244 that dealt with carbon capture. Maybe common carrier was in there. I feel like I when I voted for it, I'm sure I knew it was in it. Now I can't remember. Was that? Did that have something in there with that? Or am I mixing up bills?
Yeah, that one did, and the Mike Reese had a bill that had some carbon sequestration regulatory issues.
Oh, at the beginning of session, yes. Yes, Reese had a bill that allowed locals, if they wanted to object to it, gave them a little bit more authority when they were objecting to it, to where that's kind of similar to the coastal permits, I believe, where if the locals wanted to object to it, it gave them a little bit more standing in court should they head that direction.
Okay, but nothing passed that would, because there were some bills early on that would have substantially sort of disrupted some of the projects in the works. None of that stuff passed.
Yeah, I believe most of those, I don't know if those got out the House. That was a lot of Brett Guyman had some very passionate constituency that he was trying to take care of.
Okay. Representative LaFleur, we have a question specifically about a resolution that you introduced about internet sales of lottery tickets. The person is asking, what do you envision there? What's the goal with that resolution?
It's a study resolution, and it will be a subcommittee of the Administration of Criminal Justice Committee. I went to a gaming conference during the interim, and we received a lot of information about how states are able to raise a whole lot of funds with iLottery, and it's more modernization of a lottery system here in Louisiana. And we did look at some numbers, and conservatively, it looks like we could raise about $23 to $24 million for K through 12 education. So we are going to explore that in the interim and bring back some information to the committee and for the whole body to consider the idea of instituting iLottery in Louisiana.
And would that require just a simple majority vote of the House and Senate to do an iLottery? Or?
Yes.
We have some questions about the implications of the November special session in terms of the taxes. When y'all were looking at the budget, I'm going to start with you, Senator Henry. When y'all were looking at finalizing the budget and looking at the results of the special session in November, how did that influence your decisions in the regular session? It seemed like y'all were trying to take into account some of the uncertainty that still remains, but can you talk through how you dealt with that in crafting the budget?
Well, I mean, one thing we did, obviously, we addressed the teacher pay raise in a different manner, right? We would have liked to have had some of those constitutional amendments passed to help teacher pay raise out. We had to make that a stipend instead of permanent, but we brought that back in a different constitutional amendment this go around. So hopefully that'll be successful. Really, what it would have done is by merging the revenue stabilization, the budget stabilization, it would have given us more reoccurring revenue to spend. Now, whether we were going to spend it on reoccurring expenses or not, probably wouldn't have, because that would just grown the budget more. But that was the main. I mean, that was the main issues. Well, those are two pieces, financial pieces that we were looking at least from my perspective. We tried to, at the beginning of session, the House moved some bills to lower income tax and lower sales tax, but once REC met, lowered that amount. The economy grew. I guess our revenue was going to grow, anticipated, and all the uncertainty coming out of DC. We kind of put a pause on. We agreed. Both the House and the Senate agreed that it was time to pause those, and maybe we can bring those back in the future. But it didn't have that great of an effect on the budget from a spending perspective. We just you adjust accordingly. It wasn't the end of the world. I would have liked the teachers part to pass, because we could get that on the books permanently and move on from it. So hopefully that'll be successful in the next couple of months when it's back on the ballot.
And that'll be on the ballot in April, the one that deals with teacher pay.
Correct. I believe so, yes.
Representative McFarland, how much was the November special session? How much was that a factor in the decisions that you made in the budget and in terms of discussions about further tax changes?
So the conversations that we continue to have is the tax changes. We were only, you could say, 4 to 5 months into the new tax proposals. So the actual revenues that Department of Revenue will report to us, I don't think we will actually see those changes and how they influence the revenue stream for another year. I think we need to go through at least one full tax year before we start making substantive changes. And some of that, because some of it was delayed in the timeline in which it was going to be implemented, I don't think you'll see all of that for at least a year and a half. So look, I like where we're at. We have a good base. We know some things have changed. We gave up some income tax. We did increase some sales tax. So let's just sit back a year, see what changes, and then we can make I think a more informed decision after that. But to act too quickly would be irresponsible for us, I think, and could lead to future problems. So I would like to just sit back. I think we need to wait, see what these changes do, and then make a much more informed decision.
We have a couple questions about the Medicaid program. Obviously, both the House and Senate passed resolutions in the final days of session urging Congress to be cautious in its approach to Medicaid and any cuts to Medicaid. Can any of you talk through, does Louisiana have the ability to absorb more of the financial responsibility for Medicaid if the federal government ratchets back its spending on the program? Senator Henry, I'm just going to start with you on that one.
Well, it depends on what they do, right? So yesterday, the Senate released language. So in DC, you release the language. That doesn't mean that's the final language that'll be in the bill. They reduced language. Finance Committee reduced language, which had a bunch of things in it that would have significant effects on Louisiana, not in a positive way. So I spoke with Senator Cassidy last night to get a better understanding of what the strategy was, where he get an appreciation of, hey, look, this is what effect it would have on Louisiana if we did it, which he's obviously very cognizant of. And then how can we move forward with the changes they want to make without, devastating local hospitals, rural hospitals, and so forth. So the specifics are still vague because the language they came out with isn't the final version. It'll be put into a bill, I guess sometime next week. Maybe, but our delegation knows. I've talked to Congressman Scalise. I've talked to the Speaker. And and I talked to Cassidy a good bit about it. They're aware of it, but they're also aware that the rest of the country wants changes. And the idea of waste, fraud, and abuse sounds good, but all depends on how you define it, right? So we're working through all of that, but we can't handle a huge drop immediately. I mean, if this bill takes effect immediately, we'll absolutely come back into a special session, no doubt about it. What we do there would not be pleasant, but we'd have to do it. I'm hoping we get some type of a 2 or 3 year implementation period, with the ability to change things along the way. I think that'd be that's the most realistic thing we can ask our delegation for.
And is this you're talking about the proposal in the US Senate that would lessen the rate of a provider tax that we could charge? So essentially we would lose some of the money that we are using to finance the Medicaid program and get a federal match in Louisiana.
Correct. If we strictly went with the I guess the resolution or the idea, whatever that the declaration the president made, that would roughly be about $4 billion to the state. Now, obviously, we're not taking that path, but I would not want to craft the budget minus $4 billion.
Representative LaFleur, I know you sit on appropriations as well. What concerns do you have about, if any, about the Medicaid discussions going on in Washington?
I think that the Senate president has fully outlined what all of our concerns are with, certainly how it impacts our citizens and the care that we can provide to them and those that are providing care to them as well. And certainly I don't, as explained, as much as I don't like the idea, we talked about this going on. If it happens the way we anticipate, we'll be back in special. We'll be making cuts because we have to. It's just the unknown for me.
Okay. We have several questions about the LA GATOR program and the decision making that went into the funding levels that happened. So essentially, the governor proposed about a $94 million allocation for the voucher program. And what ended up getting passed by the legislature was about $44 million, so $50 million less than the governor requested. Representative McFarland, can you talk through sort of how y'all settled on the number between the House and the Senate?
Sure. So if you look at this program, it was passed last year. This will be the first year it's been implemented. And the intentions, as I appreciate it when it was first passed, was that we would begin with the voucher students. What the governor came out with a proposal was not just the voucher students, but also 50 million on top of that, adding more students. But when you go back and look at the contract that is still in discussion, it is on the agenda for Friday for joint budget. If you look at that contract, but when you look at the numbers, some of the numbers don't make sense. The 40,000 applicants, but only 10,000 of them are public school students now. 30,000 of them are already in private schools. Well, I don't believe that was the intention, and certainly not my intentions, I can tell you, is to do that. If we're really talking about getting children who are in DNF schools out of troubled schools or failing schools and giving their parents that option, then that's what we should be doing. But not to the point that we're saying, okay, well, we're going to take on 30,000 students who are already in private schools and start funding their private school tuition. But it's even more than that, Melinda. When you look at the contractual language, and I really apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but there's some differences in the amount per pupil of the public versus the private. So I think look, I would be paying attention to joint budget on Friday. I think that's some conversations we need to have. I think it can get fixed. I think it's just an error between what Bessie and DOE versus what we're looking at in the legislation. So I think it can be fixed. But for me, that's the three things that led me to the decision to agree to just fund the voucher students at approximately 44 million this year.
Okay, Senator Henry, I know you've talked about this issue a lot. Let me ask you a question a little bit of a different way. What do you envision the GATOR program looking like in the out years? Are you anticipating that the legislature will ramp up spending over time, or is it a wait and see sort of approach?
Oh, it's absolutely wait and see. I mean, if you look how the expense of these programs have grown in other states, I think Texas capped it at $1 billion. Their program, and what we can't afford to do is create another form of where the state is paying for kids to go to public schools and then the state is paying for kids to go to private schools. The GATOR program was originally designed to take kids who are in failing schools, just like the chairman said, take the dollar amount associated with them, which would be the state portion of the MFP. And let's say for the purpose of this is $10,000. You can spend $10,000 to send a kid to public school, but you can take that same student, can take that money and go to private school, and the MFP would be reduced by that amount, and the money would follow the student there. That's how we envisioned it. Now the state has to pay the local portion of it, which means every kid that leaves a public school that goes to a non-public school, the state pays more. Then we're creating a portal system where the money doesn't actually go to the student. It goes to an account that the child can go online with the portal controlled not by Louisiana, not by the Department of Education, but by a contractor to buy services and goods based on whatever in the portal, whatever vendors they want to pick. So you went from taking a kid from a bad school, or maybe not a bad school, maybe a school that just didn't work for that child, and moving to a school that does work for the child. To now we're paying more, and we've created an Amazon for the Department of Education to students can buy services or items online from that. We've gotten away from the general point of what we're trying to do. It evolved in a way that I was very wary of at the beginning, which is why I was so dead set on giving them the exact same amount of money they needed, because like any introductory program, you want to make sure it's successful before we expand it. This is the same group of individuals that swore up and down that the vouchers were the greatest thing we needed to do, and we didn't. And that same group came to us and said, we need to cancel this, it isn't working. So you lose some credibility when you tell something, when people trust you to do one thing, it doesn't work, and they come back and say, no, but try this. Well, we're going to hold off and we're going to see how it evolves over time. But it's also broken down by your district, like how many students are available to go to what grade level and what schools. Everybody's district is very different when it comes to how it looks at public education and private school. Jefferson Parish, for example, sends a significant number of kids to non-public schools. So when a lady stops me in the grocery store and says, Cameron, under the GATOR program, I'm using my tax dollars to send a kid to public school. Okay. I'm using my own money to send my child to a non-public school. Okay. And now you want me to spend more of my money to send another kid to a private school or a non-public school. So you want me to send 3 kids to school, one of which are mine. How does that financially work out long term? How can that happen with this program? So we're gonna guarantee you get the same amount of money last year as you got this year. And if you show progress, if you show that actually makes sense, if you're honest with the committee members, then I think that goes a long way to some type of future growth. But under no circumstances are we going to guarantee anything.
Okay. Representative LaFleur, I don't know if you want to jump into this subject before we.
Listen, the president is preaching to the choir over here. It's all about accountability. Do what you said you would do with the first batch of money, and maybe there's more available. But at this point, I think his argument and that of our chair McFarland's is, let's deal with the pot of money that we said in the original that we would give you and deal with that instead of adding more on without seeing the progress and accountability.
Okay. So we have a question about whether or not any work was done on alignment of the sales tax base in terms of the local and state sales tax rates being charged on the same things. Was anything done on that front? And are there specific issues that you think the state needs to still deal with on the tax structure going forward? Senator Henry, I'm just going to start with you and then go around to everybody on that one.
I don't believe we touched anything on that. The closest thing we came to dealt with a tax there was a debate whether it's a tax or a fee as relates to cable services, where the state is collecting a portion for the locals, and then eventually we give it back to the locals. But other than that, any type of unified tax collector or any kind of unifying the system, we didn't touch that this year. That is a pretty that is a very difficult subject matter because it requires a lot of trust on both parts. And I think we're easing into it, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Are there any particular tax structure issues you think need to be dealt with going forward after this special session that happened in November? Or do you think the bulk of what y'all wanted accomplished was done?
Well, I think I don't know whether the bulk we want to accomplish is done. What I do think we need to do is to stop changing it. Like let everything settle, give it time, see what works and doesn't work, and then go back and address it. One thing I've learned over my limited time in the building is that every year we change things and then wonder why we can't ever get an accurate number, or companies don't want to come here because every year, every 2 years, we're changing something in the tax code. We just need it to settle, and then let's see if it's productive. And if it works, then you can move forward. If it doesn't work, you'll have actually a specific reason why, instead of just the randomness that sometimes that we do things. So I think if we can just settle down, wait till, obviously next year we can't do anything with taxes, which is great. The following year is a re-election year, which historically isn't a good time for a lot of people to start messing with people's taxes. But I think if we're going to do something in a re-election year, something will be done based on common sense, based on a clear problem that we have, and to move the state forward.
Representative LaFleur, I feel like the Senate president may have just shut down really any discussion of like further changes to the tax structure. But is there anything you wanted to see that?
No, I think he's right. I think that Chairman McFarland is right. Is that we have to see, we made the changes, right, and we need the time to see what that impact looks like. And so we get a whole year's, and this is exactly what Chairman McFarland said earlier. We will have an entire year's worth of tax collections to see. And I agree with him, having been in the building, and that building meaning revenue is one of the biggest issues regarding the unified sort of system. It's all about trust. The locals don't trust us, and we don't necessarily trust the locals. That's the whole feeling why we're not under the unified now. But certainly the time in that we get within the next year to see what effect the changes have will be very important going forward when we need to set, if we need to set any new tax policy.
And for those who don't know, Representative LaFleur was at the Department of Revenue for a while. So she's got an intimate knowledge of the tax structure and tax system. Representative McFarland, have you heard anything? We have somebody asking if there's any anticipation of specific things that the governor might be line item vetoing in the funding bills. Have you heard anything in that regard? I'm not sure if a governor normally tells you in advance if they're going to line item something, but is that something you've heard about at all?
I can assure you, I've never been given notice when I had something line item veto. It was usually the press that had notified me before anyone else. But no, that's not something that the governor reaches out and works with me with. So I wouldn't have any prior knowledge.
Okay, that's what I thought. So there was a bill that passed involving some further restructuring to the Department of Economic Development. We have someone asking if anyone can explain what those changes were and what the vision is for LED going forward. Anybody feel comfortable talking about that topic? Representative McFarland, I'm tagging you just because I know it went through your committee.
It did. I think that was Senator Mizell had that.
Believe so.
The restructuring, I think it was Senate Bill 151 maybe. And it focused on really 3 or 4 different things, but one of them was like site selections, having those type of things ready, streamlining some of the LEDs and some of the tax credits and things. Now that was separate, not in the bill, but the effort to do that was giving them the ability to be more efficient on the front end when they're talking to prospective investors in Louisiana. That bill really had about 3 things that had changed. But look, Melinda, I'll say this to anyone. I like the idea better of reducing a lot of the tax credits that are especially heavily economic development influenced, taking those dollars, giving them to LED on the front end to negotiate with investors, rather than them negotiating and coming back to me later saying, hey, I made this obligation, now I need you to fund it. So it works budget wise much better. And this was a part of that bill, is that if we give them, look, we just tell them up front, here, you got 150 million this year, go make the deals. When you spend that, then you come back to us. And if we can give you some more, we will. If not, then we'll put you at a level that we think is sufficient. That is a better way to budget. What's been happening historically was not. Just having all these different tax credits, whether it was Quality Jobs Acts or part of the ITEP, and not that we're changing ITEP, but all those different variables, it was just too much. So streamlining that, I think, is a much better approach. And I just think budgetary wise, it is much simpler.
Okay.
And I'll add, Melinda, LED had a great session, right? But I think that they've sort of, in my opinion, earned the trust to have the additional tools that were provided to them throughout this session. And they've shown us the work that they can do. They showed us what was preventing them from doing more, and all of those bills were a reaction from real work going on in the field to get more people and more jobs to Louisiana. So I'm really excited to see how the changes, because there were quite a few bills that dealt with LED. So I'm excited to see what that looks like, and that we didn't pass anything that prevents them from doing the good work that they're doing.
Right. Senator Henry, I know y'all took some money out of the Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund and specifically gave it to funds for LED's use. Can you talk about how much money y'all set aside and what they're supposed to be using it for?
I think it's around 200. I think it's 283 million total, maybe 150 million for like open for site selection. What we're trying to get away from is the idea that when a company comes here, we're going to use the incentives that we've had on the books forever that don't really seem to be working. Come up with a different way of doing it, doing a pot of money where I say, we'll help you buy the land, we'll help you prepare site preparation, the road, sewer, lighting, all that. Be a little bit more aggressive on that front, because we're going after a different type of company now. Previously, we wanted, well, look, I love having Super Bowls. They're great. I love having all the tourist events. Those are fantastic. But those bring people in for a period of time, and then those people leave. We need more data centers. We need more metas. We need those type of projects that are bringing thousands of people here to stay. And I think what we took a chance, and this is one of the many things that the governor and I agree on, it's that he is absolutely willing the old way of doing it just doesn't work. And we might not understand the best way to do the new way, but we're going to try something different. And the amount of resources we've given the Secretary of LED, as well as the trust and the autonomy to say, okay, go get it. Like, if you want resources to go bring companies here, great, go do it. And that's what, and look, we're going to have all the standard people that want to come back and say, we need money for this, we need money for that. Now they have to, in essence, show like a business plan, a business model. You have to show a pro forma, say, if we're going to give you $10 million for blank, what do we get in return and when do we get it? And if I have a limited resource of money of $150 million, is that the best use, or is the application after yours better? Which one's better for the state? So we can be much more aggressive, which is what we need to do. And we can be much more strategic in what we ask for.
Okay. We have a couple questions about teacher pay. And I know one of the constitutional amendments that'll be on the April ballot involves the liquidation of those 3 education-related trust funds to pay off some retirement debt, which would then allow the school systems to use that savings that they get from not paying for retirement for teacher pay. And my understanding of all of those bills combined, if the amendment passes, is it would give teachers $2,250, I think, in a pay increase that would be permanent. So right now they get a stipend of $2,000. This would be a little bit more, and all of it would be permanent. Is there any ongoing discussion about how to get teachers to the Southern regional average, to go beyond this constitutional amendment and actually get them to the Southern regional average? We've had a couple people ask about that. Representative McFarland, I'm just going to start with you.
Well, I'll go back to, look, let's get this ballot language on the ballot. Let's get it passed. Let's get this permanent pay increase implemented. Obviously, maintaining qualified teachers at a competitive salary is always going to be a part of the conversation. I mean, I've been on appropriations for 10 years, and this is the 5th pay raise in that 10 years. So I guess under, you know, my estimates, when you start looking at it that way, that's about every 2 years you're giving pay raises. There's other things in the education when I hear from constituents that they would like to see. While we may not be at the highest level in the Southern region as far as teacher salaries, we're higher than anyone else in the Southern region and dollars per pupil. So we need to, in my opinion, look at that, find that balance, and continue to just take that approach. I think that if you look at the job markets today, being a teacher is not necessarily at the top of it. And so if we don't address the income, we're not going to get the best teachers, and we're not going to get more students leaving high school going to college to be educators. So I do think it's something that we're going to obviously continue to have that conversation about. Like I said, once again, been there 10 years. This is a 5th pay raise. So you can say that's about every 2 years we're having this conversation.
And Representative, I just want to say part of that high per pupil amount actually is related to retirement debt. Not all of it, but I just want to make sure we understood that.
Representative LaFleur, thoughts on teacher pay? I know when you're sitting on the Appropriations Committee, there are a lot of competing interests that you have to sift through. So do you think the legislature is doing or has done enough on the teacher pay front?
We've done what we can, and the stipend for both the teachers and the support staff is what we could do. The constitutional amendment now will be before the people for that permanent pay raise that will then also, it's a pay raise that goes towards their retirement. And back to what Stephen pointed out, you got to pay down the debt. So all of this stuff sort of works together. The goal is to sort of make sure that the public understands this, and so that when they do vote for the constitutional amendment, it's an informed vote. So I think that's where that was the problem the last time, right? Whole bunch of words, not informed, and not enough information provided. But what I saw throughout this session, and what voters will see, is those things have been broken down. They will see them again in bite-sized pieces, so they can make those decisions on what they want to do.
Senator Henry, we have a question about the legislature stepping in to support the LSU system to account for budget shortfalls that involved federal cuts to science and research.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you anticipate the legislature will be able to continue accounting for in the budget going forward, or was this a one-time thing to help out the LSU campuses?
This was, I mean, right now it's considered a one-time thing. It was, I think it was a surprise to everybody. No, moving forward, you have to adjust your overall budgets for the universities, have to adjust everything, knowing you're going to start receiving less federal dollars. So every year they can't come back and say, look, the federal government cut us, so you have to backfill. This is a one-time thing. And then moving forward, they're going to have to address these on their own.
Okay. And also, Senator Henry, we have somebody asking about coastal restoration and protection efforts. Y'all did pass some funding for that as well. I know obviously there's always money that's going into these projects. Can you talk through sort of how y'all budget for that and what that looks like in terms of the funding that's available?
You know, coastal restoration protection is difficult to fund because of the amount of money they have in their accounts right now. A lot of these coastal projects, if Jack might be able to help me on this, they might have $3 or $4 billion in their funds. And this is for projects that are are either underway or shortly underway to move forward. And people always want us to give more money to coastal, give more money to coastal. It's difficult when you're trying to balance between, are you going to spend more money on healthcare, higher ed, or coastal, and coastal has $3 billion in an account. It's very hard moving forward until you see a need for it, not necessarily the coast eroding, but more of a need for, can they actually spend the money we're giving them? So I know we made some adjustments to coastal this year. I don't know whether we had a specific line item in it. Jack might be able to help me out with that. But that's been our problems going forward. I know last year we gave it $10 million at the end because Senator Fessy was obviously was important to him. But that's really the issue we've had moving forward, is that one piece of, they have so much money on hand now. How much more do you need to give them, and how long does it take them to actually spend it?
And I think Representative McFarland, I think the House added $40 million for coastal restoration and protection projects. I'm not sure if that made it through the whole process.
It did. It was done utilizing the surplus. Obviously CPRA is one of the 6 things that you can utilize surplus for. Originally, they were asking for around 100 million, but then they agreed that 40 million was a more realistic number in reference to what Senate President Cameron Henry said. When legislators, including myself, when you sit there and you see that they got billions and sitting in there on projects waiting, and yes, they have to keep other projects in line to begin and to draw down the federal dollars with that revenue. But at the same time, when I'm sitting here trying to make a decision whether I'm going to fund teacher stipends or health care or give CPRA more money. But I do think there's a balance. And once again, this year we found that balance. And look, to CPRA's credit, they stepped up and said, hey, we can't use that much money this year. We can realistically, if you give us 40 million, we can put that in play next year. So to their credit, I appreciate that. It makes my job much easier. But there was 40 million, and it was utilized out of the surplus funds.
Okay.
All righty. I want to thank everyone for time. I have one question. I want to go with just a quick closer. You know how they, in football and all sporting, and in fact, LSU just won their college baseball game today, so we're all very happy about that. They usually put like early top 10 lists, like way too early. So I'm going to ask y'all, putting aside special session and anything else that might happen, for next year's non-fiscal regular session, what's one big issue that you want to address? We don't need any details at this time. Just one big thing, one issue out there. You're like, look, I want to sink my teeth into that. Why don't we start with Representative LaFleur?
Stephen doesn't want y'all to have any rest, just
Yeah,
to rest on laurels.
No, look, I
Yeah.
know y'all are always thinking about how to improve Louisiana at every moment of your life. So I want to just give you that outlet to go ahead and tell us.
Yeah, and so I'm going to violate your first rule. If you ask me top of mind, what I want to see settled are the issues with redistricting in the maps.
That's fair.
Nothing. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay. Chairman McFarland.
Yeah. So look, and I can't take credit for this. I'm gonna have to give credit to the Speaker DeVilliers, but he's asked all the committee chairs to have hearings in their respective districts. So I'm excited. I get to have an appropriations meeting in my district, and the appropriations members get to come here, but it's something different. The public, especially for North Louisiana, majority of them have never even attended an appropriations hearing. So look, I think that's an unusual approach, but I like it because one of the things is in the public is we have to have their trust. And how do we gain their trust? Well, if we could go out into the public and have those meetings, look, and those that would never have an opportunity to come and hear a budget hearing would finally get that opportunity. Look, I think it goes a long ways to putting to rest that there's smoke and mirrors and we're all unscrupulous individuals, and that they would realize that we really do have the public's best interest.
That is fascinating. Maybe I could get some students to come attend to that. I think that would be really cool. And we don't think you're all unscrupulous, Representative. So, all right, President Henry, you get the last word on this.
Well, I think keeping that budget at the low, less than 1% growth is a realistic goal. Touching DOTD again, continue to refine that. Working to make sure Susan Bourgeois has the tools she needs at economic development. I think that's going to work. And then doing what we did this year of not letting programs grow exponentially, managing expectations for every year to year that our previous habit of just letting programs grow and grow and grow. Now scrutiny on both the programs and tax programs as well as credits have been really working. Members have really been working to find out the return on the investment, that even greater scrutiny than before. And I think that's going to benefit Louisiana moving forward.
OG budget hawk, I think there. So
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it. We covered a ton of information. I think that's going to be really helpful. I'll just also thank you for, your civic behavior that you have. I think that's a great model for other people. As always, really appreciate it as president of PAR. I want to thank all our participants as well. A reminder, this will be available on our YouTube channel. We're going to send it out. So if you subscribe to us, you'll see that, or social media, you'll see that as well. And I think that'll be a great resource for people trying to figure out what happened. Once again, thank y'all so much.
Thank you. You have a good day.